I always thought Christmas was a time to unite, to welcome, to try to be better even if just for a few hours. But that year, I learned it could also be the day the truth tears through like wrapping paper. It was amid the blinking lights, the house full of fake laughter, and the smell of roasting turkey that everything fell apart. We were at my husband's mother's house, Margot's, like every year. That whole tradition thing tree up since November, fireplace lit just for show, even though it wasn't even that cold. And Maya, our daughter, was more excited than ever. She'd spent days painting a Christmas card for Grandma Margot. She added glitter, drew their faces together, wrote with the wobbly handwriting of someone learning with care. And I saw in her eyes that hope of finally belonging, of being seen. The night went on in that stiff way it always does at these parties where there's more protocol than truth. The kids were called one by one to get their presents in front of everyone, complete with photos and collective awes. A pretty little show to watch until it wasn't. When all the kids had gotten their gifts and only Maya was left sitting in the corner, holding the card she'd made. The silence turned awkward. Maya looked around as if waiting for someone to say, "Hey, there's hers too." But no one did. Not a comment, not an attempt to cover it up. I felt my stomach twist. I looked at Caleb, who froze. Then I asked, as calmly as I could, "Margot, what about Maya's gift?" And she replied without even blinking, "She's not really family." Just like that, out loud, in front of everyone. I felt my blood boil and my throat tighten. Maya, who had been so excited, now stared at the floor, her expression closed off. I could feel the weight of what this meant to her. I saw her there, so small, so vulnerable, yet with a quiet strength that broke my heart. She was realizing that, in Margot's eyes, she was nothing, not a granddaughter, not part of the family. What hurt the most was watching her swallow it all. I wanted to scream, to march up to Margot and slap her, but I didn't. The last thing Maya needed was more hostility. I held back, but an endless rage grew inside me as I watched Margot's forced smile, as if she were doing the world a favor by being there. The worst part was that this didn't seem like the first time. Caleb's frozen expression told me everything. He knew what this meant. He felt her pain too. But he didn't show anger, didn't yell, didn't confront his mother. He just calmly walked to the table, picked up an envelope, and left the room. Everyone stared, confused. I, still in shock, held myself together. There was nothing I could do in that moment. Maya's face, though trying to recover, was still stained with humiliation. She stood up, walked to the corner where she'd left Margot's gift, and set the card aside. I stood there, speechless, thinking about everything we'd been through to get here and how this moment might be a point of no return. She didn't deserve this. No child does. I didn't know exactly what he was doing when he grabbed that envelope. I was lost in my emotions, wondering how no one else saw what was happening. But Caleb knew what to do. He'd always been calmer, more analytical. And in that moment, more than ever, he knew words weren't enough. He was preparing the response I knew had to come, but I never imagined it would be like this. He took copies of the adoption papers, the birth certificate, the will that named him as Maya's legal father, and most importantly, the document that clearly stated Maya was, in fact, his daughter legally, officially. He walked into the office, where all the important conversations happened, and locked himself in. As much as I wanted to follow, I felt paralyzed. The weight of it all was crushing me, but this wasn't the time to act without thinking. What happened next was something I never expected. Caleb returned after a few minutes. He didn't say a word. He just took that envelope and, with a coldness I'd never seen in him, walked up to his mother, Margot, who was still there pretending this wasn't the worst Christmas of her life. He handed her the envelope and said, with terrifying calm, "If you can't accept Maya as part of this family, then there's nothing left between us. I have no reason to be here." No yelling, no accusations, just firm certainty and a silence that cut through the room. Margot stared at him, confused, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. But she knew. Caleb was serious. He wasn't bluffing. He was willing to lose his own mother, if he had to, for Maya. The silence that followed was chilling. The whole house froze, as if the air had turned to ice. I saw Margot, eyes glistening, trying to process what had just happened. I knew that ultimatum wouldn't be easy to swallow. She'd always been a proud woman, and accepting Maya as her granddaughter meant facing years of prejudice, old beliefs she didn't want to let go of. But Caleb wasn't playing. He had the power to do this. He had the law on his side, but more than that, he had the unwavering will to protect our daughter. In that moment, I saw his strength, a quiet strength only those who fought this hard for someone can have. Margot stayed silent for a long time, staring at the papers, unable to speak. I knew the bomb had gone off, and now came the consequences of what she'd sown. The pain was palpable. The next morning, Margot appeared in the living room, eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept all night. I knew she was reflecting on what she'd done, but I also knew an apology wouldn't come easy. She walked up to Maya, who was sitting quietly on the couch, her gaze distant, as if she'd shut herself off from everything. Maya looked at her without a word, but I saw the surprise on her face. Margot approached, her expression more serious than I'd ever seen, and said in a near whisper, "I was wrong, Maya. I'm so sorry. You are my granddaughter, and you always will be." She handed her a gift, something simple but thoughtful. Maya, still guarded, didn't pull away. What happened next was something neither Caleb nor I expected. Maya, with all her maturity, accepted the gift and replied with the calm of someone who knows peace is worth more than resentment. "I know, Grandma, I know." It wasn't easy, but for the first time I felt something real was beginning. The house seemed to return to normal. The conversations were lighter, the laughter more genuine. Christmas carried on, but for me nothing was the same. I still felt the weight of Margot's words, still saw the emptiness in Maya's eyes. But slowly something was shifting. The tension between Caleb and his mother, which had once seemed insurmountable, now felt different, like a new pact had been made. I realized that what Maya wanted most was to feel she belonged, that she wasn't just a guest in her own family. It wasn't an easy forgiveness, not a magical change, but that night, after Margot's apology, was the first step in making her feel acceptance wouldn't just come from us, but from the whole family. It was as if Margot had begun to thaw slowly but visibly. The hardest part was over, and now all that remained was rebuilding trust. Maya, meanwhile, kept expressing herself through her art. But now, her paintings were different. Before, she painted like a child, innocent, unreflective. Now it was like she was projecting every emotion she'd kept inside. I saw in her art the feelings she couldn't put into words. Every brushstroke was a silent scream from someone who'd spent so long searching for her place. One night, as she showed me a painting of a house with many open doors, she told me, "I feel like one of them is finally opening for me." I didn't know if she meant our home or her own journey, but those words stayed with me. I knew that, despite the pain, Maya was beginning to understand she had the strength to move forward, and forgive. More than that, she was learning that family love doesn't have to come from blood. The change between Maya and Margot was slower than I'd imagined. It wasn't a sudden click, as if acceptance erased everything before. It was more like a flower blooming slowly, carefully, without rush. After that apology, Margot started showing up differently. She wasn't the grandmother who kept her distance anymore. She talked to Maya more, asked about school, about her paintings, even offered to teach her family recipes, something that would have been unthinkable before. But Maya was hesitant too. She wasn't ready to dive back in, and deep down I knew she needed that time. Margot, meanwhile, was trying, awkwardly, but genuinely, to acknowledge Maya's place in the family. It wouldn't be easy, but the change, however slow, was happening. I couldn't help but reflect on what family really means. The word had always carried weight for me, but this made me question everything. It wasn't blood, traditions, or forced smiles that made a family. It was love, acceptance, and commitment, and that's what mattered to us. I realized how hard but necessary it is to choose love, how easy it is to stay silent, ignoring hurtful actions. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect what's important. Caleb and I had chosen our daughter, and now more than ever, we had to choose our family, blood aside. I knew that was how love would flourish, even in the unlikeliest places. Over time, Caleb's Relationship with Margot shifted too subtly. They still spoke, but there was tension, like they were navigating uncharted waters. Caleb had never been one to falter easily, but seeing his mother treat Maya like a stranger changed something in him. He distanced himself, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment that weighed heavier than any argument. As a father, he worked to make sure Maya knew his love was unshakable, even if his mother's wasn't. He was rebuilding trust, step by step, and I admired him more for it. It wasn't easy for him to watch the woman who raised him struggle with what should have been unconditional. But he stood firm where it mattered. He wanted Maya to know she was part of our story, no questions asked. I began to see that Maya had become the heart of our family in ways I never expected. She brought out the strength in each of us to face our own fears and flaws. With her quiet resilience, she became our anchor. Through all this, I grew even more certain she was the missing piece, the one who'd make us grow, rethink our actions, and learn the true power of forgiveness. I never imagined the pain of seeing her excluded could lead to such change. Maya, through her art and her silence, taught us more about family than words ever could, and I knew then our journey was just beginning. Real healing only happens when you refuse to stay silent and choose, every day, to do what's right. Maya taught us that, small as she was, she became the strongest force in our home. That Christmas stayed with us in ways I couldn't have predicted. Caleb, Margot, and I started making different choices after that. It wasn't about who was right or wrong anymore, it was about facing hard truths head on. We couldn't pretend not to see injustice, not to acknowledge Maya's fight to belong. This wasn't just about Christmas. It was about how our family saw differences, treated others. From then on, I knew we'd have to restructure, to make love and acceptance our priority. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. There was a renewed energy in us. Now, whenever an obstacle arose, we knew what to do. Face it with courage, without letting fear or pride steer us wrong. I also realized true change doesn't come from empty words or promises. It comes from action, from choosing what's right even when it's hard. That Christmas wasn't a sudden miracle, it was the power of a decisive act of love. Caleb, with those documents and that ultimatum, showed what truly mattered. Margot, with her apology, made her choice too. And in the end, the ones who benefited most were us, as a family, as parents, as individuals. Maya, with her grace and maturity, showed us forgiveness isn't easy, but accepting others' flaws and all is what makes us whole. I knew our lives would never be the same, and somehow that gave me peace. The peace of knowing we'd made the right choice, even if it was the hardest. Breaking generational barriers was one of the toughest, but most transformative parts of this. Margot, with her deep-rooted beliefs, represented a past we all had to confront. The hardest part wasn't her resistance, but the ongoing effort to make her see Maya wasn't some random choice. She was our daughter, with all the love and rights that came with it. When I saw Margot hesitantly reach out to Maya, I also saw our family breaking an invisible chain of prejudice we hadn't even realized was there. That exchange between grandmother and granddaughter reflected something deeper. It wasn't just about accepting Maya, it was about understanding that what divides us isn't the nature of the bond, but the unwillingness to change. And by standing our ground, we did. We changed. All of us. That moment of discomfort, then reconciliation, dissolved not just the rift between Caleb and Margot, but between the past and the future. Looking at our family now, the pride I feel isn't just for what we've overcome, but for who we've become. Maya, through her art and resilience, taught us daily what it means to be strong yet vulnerable. She didn't just face life's challenges, she turned them into something beautiful. She showed us, in her quiet way, that true greatness is being yourself, even when the world tries to define you otherwise. And as parents, we grew with her. Reflecting on everything, I see we've built a family that isn't perfect, but is real. And that, to me, will always be enough. There's no room for lies or uneasy silences anymore, only love, acceptance, and the choices that made us more human. Looking back, I know we did our best, and despite the struggles, our family is stronger than ever. That time marked the start of a new chapter for us. It wasn't just Margot's reconciliation or Maya's forgiveness that changed things, it was the lessons we all learned. For each of us, the meaning of family expanded. We realized forgiveness isn't always instant, change isn't always magic. It takes persistence, patience, and willingness to accept flaws. For Caleb, choosing Maya over his mother showed his priorities would never waver. For Maya, the lesson was that even in rejection, she had the power to rise and keep loving. And for Margot, it was a difficult but necessary process of seeing beyond her own barriers. We all came out stronger, wiser, and more aware of our responsibility to protect what matters. Love, acceptance, and the courage to keep trying, even when it's hard. In the end, healing came from within. It was slow, full of ups and downs, but also immense gratitude. My biggest takeaway is that no family is perfect, no love is flawless. What matters is what we do with those flaws. What became clear is that our ability to grow, to reinvent ourselves, is what truly makes us a family. No matter how distant or different we may seem at times, it's our willingness to love, to listen, and to keep finding ways to stay together that makes the difference. Looking back, despite everything, we emerged more united and stronger. Now, when we look at each other, we don't see mistakes, we see the scars that made us more human, and those scars are now part of our story, part of our family. Pain turned into strength, and in the end, what remains is the certainty that, no matter what, we are a family, and we always will be. Over time, Maya found a way to channel her emotions into her art. Her paintings, once marked by quiet sadness, began reflecting her journey of self-discovery. Those brushstrokes, once full of insecurity and pain, now told stories of resilience. I remember one painting in particular, one she made in the middle of all this. It was a tree with deep roots, even as its leaves kept changing. When I asked what it meant, she just smiled and said, "That's me, Mom. Change is part of it, but my roots are strong." It was a revelation proof of how she was finding herself despite everything. Art became not just an escape, but her way of asserting herself, of finding her voice. She'd grown wiser than anyone could have imagined. Each piece expressed what words couldn't, and that made me prouder than ever. Her art was now a reflection of the quiet strength she'd always had, one I only truly saw after we listened. I couldn't stop thinking about the legacy this would leave for Maya. More than learning to handle rejection, the most important lesson was choosing love despite circumstances. She learned that even when people fail you, you can choose how to respond without losing yourself. Teaching her that was one of my life's greatest challenges, because it was something I needed to practice too, especially with Margot. Our healing wasn't just about Maya, it was about all of us. I realized love isn't always unconditional or freely given. Sometimes it must be earned, and that starts by looking inward. By teaching Maya this, I wasn't just helping her heal, I was showing her how to build a future on firm, conscious choices. The legacy we wanted for her was clear. No matter the obstacle, choosing love always has the power to transform. Maya became the key to a new dynamic in our family. Her presence forced us to confront parts of ourselves we'd ignored. She challenged us to be better, but also more human. Before, we were just people tied by blood. Now, we had something deeper. The pain of her rejection and how she handled it made us all reflect on what family really means. She made us look beyond appearances to understand that loyalty and belonging aren't about surnames or biology. Maya's story reminded us family is built daily, through choices and bonds, not just birth. Over time, she became the thread that wove us together in ways I never imagined. Now, looking ahead, I see a family stronger, more united, but also more aware of its flaws. That Christmas wasn't just about Caleb and Margot or Maya's acceptance, it transformed all of us. We're no longer a family that hides difficulties or fakes perfection. Now we know we can face anything as long as we have each other. Our story became one of overcoming, yes, but also understanding that everyone has their place, their journey, and the capacity to grow. Sometimes we just need a push to see the world differently. Maya, with her art and quiet strength, was that push. She didn't just carve her own path, she showed us all that true belonging comes when we choose to be part of each other's lives, genuinely, and without fear. Looking back, I see our family's strength wasn't in avoiding struggles, but in how we faced them. That Christmas, which seemed like just another celebration, became a turning point, not just for Maya, but for all of us. It taught us that when we unite with our whole hearts, we can overcome anything, no matter how impossible it seems. What once felt unbearable gave us the chance to grow, to heal, and to finally understand that family isn't about never failing. It's about how we move forward after we do. Maya, with her strength and grace, taught us that more than any words could. And in the end, our family became more united, stronger, and more capable of love than we'd ever been before. Through it all, what struck me most was knowing that, no matter what, we'll always have each other. And that, to me, is the true strength of any family.